During the winter months, much of our gardening activity, of course, turns indoors. In December, there are certain plants, of course, that immediately come to mind. If you've not planted that amaryllis bulb yet, don't worry, it's not too late. If you plant this bulb anytime in December, it's just going to bloom in January or February. And maybe that's actually a good thing. By the time you've put away the holiday decorations, you'll be ready for something fresh to bloom in the house that time of year. Many of us have the Christmas cactus, which, of course, many of these, although we call them Christmas cactus, often bloom much earlier than that. But if you do have one still in bloom, here's a couple of tips for those. While this plant is in bloom, if you can locate it someplace out of direct sunlight, that's going to help these flowers to actually last longer. Also, keep it consistently watered during this time. You don't want to keep it wet, but don't let it dry out in between waterings. Another thing I've noticed about the Christmas cactus, at least with mine, it sometimes will drip some sap from these flowers onto your tabletop. And it's probably a good idea to keep an eye on that and either be careful where you put the plant, put something under it, or get those wiped up promptly. Of course, the plant that we most often associate with the holiday season is poinsettias. If you're bringing a poinsettia home, one of the most important things is thinking about where you're going to locate that plant. It's tempting to put this plant right beside the front door where your visitors will see it as soon as they come in. However, that's probably not a good idea, because if it's in a location where that cold blast of air is going to hit that plant every time somebody comes in that door, that cold air will really take a toll on this tropical plant, and it can start to drop leaves pretty quickly. On the other end of that, though, you do not want to put this, if you can help it, in front of a heat vent, because that dry air blowing on the plant may cause some of the leaf and bract tips to dry out, or if it's drying it out too quickly, can also cause the lower leaves to start falling off prematurely. Now, watering is important with this poinsettia. You want to keep it consistently moist, not overly wet. I suggest, if you want to keep this plant in this decorative foil, pull the foil wrapper off and cut the bottom out of it so that you can water the plant and have it drain properly. Then, of course, put the plant in a good saucer so that every time you water the plant, the water will run all the way through and drain out the bottom of the pot. If this plant stands in water, such as having that foil around the bottom of that pot, it can develop root rot and will go downhill pretty quickly on you. You may have other house plants in the house this time of year. Sometimes we have moved things from outdoors to indoors, and it takes a little time to figure out the frequency of watering. That can even be the case, though, if your plants haven't moved, because what tends to happen is once the heating system comes on, the air gets a lot drier and your plants may dry out more quickly. How often that plant is going to need to be watered is going to depend on whether it's in a clay pot or something like a plastic or ceramic pot that is not going to dry out as quickly, as well, of course, on the size of the plant and where it's located. When you are watering, you want to make sure the plant actually needs watering, feel that soil and make sure it's starting to feel dry, and then always put enough water in that pot to where it's going to run out at the bottom of the container. That way, once the water has run out of those drainage holes, you know that the plant has been thoroughly watered and you've gotten water throughout that pot. Another plant that frequently comes into our homes this time of year, of course, is the Christmas tree. If you are purchasing a cut Christmas tree, if at all possible, it's a very good idea if you can, before you bring the tree into the house, cut a few inches off of the base of the trunk of that tree so that you can reopen those water conducting vessels. And then of course immediately get that tree into water. Then it's really important those first few days to check the water in that tree stand probably a couple of times a day. It's not uncommon for a freshly cut tree to soak up as much as a gallon of water a day in that first several days. So you don't ever want to allow that reservoir to run dry, because if the bottom of that trunk dries out and reseals, it's not going to take up water again. The best way to keep that Christmas tree safe and to not be a fire hazard is to keep it well watered so that the needles do not dry out. If you bring a living Christmas tree home, that is one that will be planted out in the landscape after the holidays, the most important thing is going to be not to keep it in the house too long. Really 1 week should be the length of time, 10 days at absolute maximum, because the longer you keep that tree indoors where it's warm, the more it's going to come out of dormancy and may not survive when you take it back out in the cold. Of course, get it planted immediately, and yes, December is fine for planting not only that Christmas tree, but other landscape plants anytime the ground is not frozen. Get it watered in really well and get some mulch around it, and then of course next summer remember to keep it watered. We do of course often get some pleasant days during the month of December for working outside. If you've got oak trees in your yard, you may have one of those trees that keeps dribbling down leaves all winter long. So it's a good idea to take a look occasionally and make sure the leaves are not accumulating, not only where they might be unsightly, but you still do not want to let those leaves accumulate on areas like your pansy beds or onto evergreen ground covers. While you are outside, if you are collecting greenery for your holiday decorating, remember that you are in the process doing some pruning on your landscape plants, so keep good pruning practices in mind, making your pruning cuts back to a side branch or to a leaf node. It is okay to do light pruning on any of your evergreen shrubs this time of year. It's not the best time to do any severe pruning, such as if you are renovating a shrub. I would wait until March to do that. It's also not a very good time to prune fruit trees. You want to wait until late February or preferably March for pruning those fruit trees. You can, however, prune your grapevines, especially if you want to use those cuttings to perhaps make wreaths and other decorations with. Didn't get those daffodils bulbs planted yet? That's okay. Go ahead and get them planted. The sooner the better. Probably the worst that's going to happen if they're nice, fat, healthy bulbs is that they're just going to bloom later than they might ordinarily bloom. At worst, they might only put up leaves and not give you flowers for another year yet. If you have gardeners on your holiday shopping list, why not do some shopping at your local garden centers? Not only will you find lots of really good ideas for gardeners and non-gardeners alike, but it probably will be much less stressful shopping than making one more trip to the shopping mall. And finally, let me wrap up today by wishing everybody a safe and happy holiday season from Buncombe County Cooperative Extension Office. If you have more gardening questions, feel free to contact us at Buncombe County Cooperative Extension.